the Persians and the Romans, the Hebrews were enslaved, deported, and dispersed. Now when they jump down, it speaks about this. This flight was to take them to many places throughout antiquity. Hebrews followed the trade routes of the known world. See, there were trade routes in ancient times. This is why I'm able to show you these maps, because these maps were really trade routes that the Hebrews, Canaanites, and other people knew about, that people from the northern countries didn't know about, like the Greeks and Romans. This is how we was able to quickly run into different lands, because we understood the trade routes of Mesopotamia, the trade routes of the Sahara Desert and other areas. This is how we knew how to run into West Africa. Let's continue on. It says, throughout antiquity, Hebrews followed the trade routes of the known world, from Mesopotamia to Canaan, Egypt, Ethiopia, and deep into Africa, around the Mediterranean, into the lands bordering it, and later into the rest of Europe, into India by sea, and through Persia and Afghanistan, and into China, and through Central Asia during the Babylonian captivity. Now you got to remember, in ancient times there wasn't no such thing as Afghanistan, Pakistan. All that was the land of Elam, or what we know as Indo-Kush, because remember, them lands was all created during the time of Gandhi. So we need to really study and articulate history, how they carved up these lands, and we're making it seem like the name of them lands and the way that the land mass is today is the same as yesterday.
Yeah, the British was mainly responsible for that.
No question.
When the British took over those areas of India, Afghanistan.
No doubt.
Because the British was the one that divided India and Pakistan.
No question. And look at this. The Hebrew communities in China, India, and Europe met with different receptions. In China, where the Universal Jewish Encyclopedia mentions a stone tablet recording the history of the ancient Chinese Israelites who came during the Chao dynasty of 1120 to 220 BCE. They experienced centuries of respect, acceptance without religious intolerance. It was not persecution, but recruiting natural cataclysms that finally caused this community to collapse. In India, their reception was similar. Indian Hebrews prospered in trade of oil pressing, served in governments and education, and provided many soldiers both before and after India's colonization by the British. Benjamin L. Israel, in his informative booklet, The Jews of India, has insisted that India is perhaps the only country in the world in which, through long centuries, Hebrew Israelites have dwelt in complete security and have been accorded an honorable place in the social structure of the land. As for Abraham's descendants, who scattered around the Mediterranean and into countries on its borders and into Europe, it is rather common knowledge what has happened to their fate. No, what they're trying to do is play a little trickery here. They're trying to make it seem like the Israelites that migrated into Europe got absorbed by Europeans, and this is where the so-called European Jews come from. No, we know that King Fernando and Queen Isabella in 1492 exiled the Jews of Spain at the island of St. Thomas, which is off the island, which is an island right next to Africa.
Yeah, right off from Portugal.
You see what I'm saying? So we know what they did with the original black Israelites in Spain and Portugal. Then it goes on to say, okay, great great prosperity has often been followed by or accompanied by spiritual persecution, scapegoating, and forced conversion to both Islamic and Christians, or Muslim and Christians. What is not so commonly known is the history of the Hebrews who scattered into sub-Saharan Africa. This is what we need to know. Now, we talk about Dr. Yosef Ben and how Dr. Yosef Ben is, he's this Kemetic scholar, and he debunks what we say when it comes to dealing with being an Israelite. Let's hear what he says. Let's hear what Dr. Yosef. First of all, Dr. Yosef Ben Yochanan has a Hebrew name. That's number one. If you think your people are Egyptians, as you say, why wouldn't you have an Egyptian name? That's number one. Number two, why would you make a statement like this? This is from out of his own mouth. This is from out of my book called The 12 Divine Essays on Shemitic Hebrew Israelite Truth. And this is what Dr. Yosef Ben said out of his own mouth. In his book, African Origins of Major Western Religions, on page 75, again, African Origins of Major Western Religions, on page 75, by Dr. Yosef Ben Yochanan, writes, there were many Hebrew tribes that were of indigenous African origin. Now we know our people, they're not Africans. We know that. But for him to even state that they're indigenous to the continent, he's admitting that the Hebrews were black. He's admitting it, clear as day. I'll read it again. There were many Hebrew tribes that were of indigenous African origin. So he is admitting that the Hebrews were black. He continues to say, these quote-unquote African Hebrews, Israelites, were caught in a rebellion in Cyrene during 115 ACE. This rebellion also marked the beginning of a mass Hebrew Israelite migration southward into the Sudan of West Africa. Whoa. Whoa, baby. Ain't that deep? Whoa. This man is admitting. He's admitting that Israelites migrated into West Africa. Now, we go right back to the same writing that came from the Ascent magazine. What is not so commonly known is the history of those Hebrews who scattered into sub-Saharan Africa or West Africa. There were many Hebrew tribes that were of indigenous African origin. These African Hebrews were caught up in a rebellion in Cyrene during 115 ACE. This rebellion also marked the beginning of a mass Hebrew migration southward into the Sudan of West Africa. Here it is right here. So y'all know we're not lying. Also, African origin major Western religions, page 75, Dr. Yosef Ben. There it go right there. There it is right there, out of his mouth. He's clearly admitting that there were Hebrews in West Africa that migrated into West Africa. So if he's admitting this, why is it so hard for a lot of Afrocentric scholars and Egyptologists that are Hebrew Israelites thinking that they're Egyptians? Why is it hard for them to believe when your master teacher said this? He said this. I didn't say this. He said this. The more that is learned through anthropology and archaeology, the more certain it appears that dark-skinned Hebrews spread their spirituality into many areas, especially into East and West Africa. Let's stop. Let's stop. All on the YouTube, you hear people talking about, who in West Africa are they saying that they Hebrew Israelites? Where is that at? Let's go to Joshua real quick. chapter 15, verse